quarantine, we have been drinking a lot of coffee. Okay, to give you an idea, in the morning we drink 6 cups of coffee, which takes 3 tablespoons of grounds to make. In the afternoon we drink 4 cups of coffee, which takes 2 tablespoons of grounds to make. I have incorporated coffee into some of my baking. I would say about a half cup or so of grounds I've used in my baking. And so altogether, this becomes a lot of coffee usage. And so therefore, at the store last time, we went ahead and got the biggest coffee that we could. Okay, so it says in here you have 42.5 ounces, which is equivalent to 2 pounds, 10.5 ounces of coffee grounds. Okay? So my question would be, can we write an equation to figure out how many days this is going to last us in quarantine? So let's go ahead and start writing our equation. So we need to know what is going to go into our equation. So remember the information. So we know that per day, we're using 3 tablespoons in the morning. We're using 2 tablespoons every afternoon. Now remember the half cup used for baking, we just kind of said that was overall, at some point I've been using that in my baking. Okay, so we've been using at some point a half cup. And then we know total how much coffee we've got. So total was that 42.5 ounces. Now I am going to have to make a correction there, so I just realized that that's weight, and what we're looking for, tablespoons, is a volume, so that would be an interesting conversion, which we can do someday. But for right now, let's go ahead and go with the claim on the front of the container that it makes 360 servings of coffee, and for them, a tablespoon is a serving. So we're going to go ahead and say that there are 360 tablespoons in that coffee jar. So how could this all go together in an equation? Well, first of all, let's think about what we don't know. What we don't know is how many days this coffee is going to last us. Okay, so I think this day right here is our x, our variable. Okay, and if I knew what x was, I would total up how much coffee I was using by multiplying 3 by the number of days, 2 by the number of days, add those together, add in my amount of coffee that I'm using in my baking, and that should hopefully equal up to my total. So just as we said it, we're going to write it now algebraically, and it'll turn into an equation. So 3 times our number of days, so 3x, plus 2 times our number of days, 2x. Okay. Side note, could I have combined this together and written 5x? Yes, but I'm going to go ahead and keep them separate. That way when I look back at my equation, I know what was my morning, what was my afternoon, just in case we decide to change it up later in quarantine and, up one of those. Okay. All right, I know that I'm using a half cup at some time. Now notice half cup tablespoons. We should probably use the same units throughout, right? So a quick little Google search will tell you that a half cup is equal to 8 tablespoons. So this is how much I'm using throughout every morning. This is how much I'm using throughout every afternoon. Let's add in that total amount that I'm using for baking. So all together, this should end up being the total amount of coffee I'm using, which in our case is 360 tablespoons. And now we solve, okay? So combine like terms, 3x and 2x make 5x. Now let's subtract 8 from both sides. So 5x equals 352. Divide both sides by 5. We will get a decimal. Gotta love your calculator. If you did that by hand, very good. All right, so 70.4. And that is in days. Now, 0.4 of a day, I think I'd prefer to round to a whole day. So in this case, since we're wondering how many days this is going to last us, well, a fourth of a day is no good. We need coffee to last all the way to the end of the day. Okay, so let's round this down and say that that canister of coffee should last us 70 days. We might even make it to the end. So some quick pro tips about solving equations in the real world, okay? So when you're reading through a word problem or you're faced with a scenario where you need to write an equation for it, first of all, always think about what you don't know, okay? What is the variable going to be? It's a great idea actually to even write it down and what letter you're going to use for your variable. Are you going to use X? Are you going to use D, T, whatever it's going to be, okay? After you've decided what you need to know, then think about how would you calculate with the numbers that were given. Okay, if you were going front to back in this problem and let's say you actually knew what the variable was, how would you do the calculation? But then go and translate that into an algebraic equation. Okay, so try out using those 2 tips, try out several more word problems, see how you're doing, and obviously ask any questions that you have. Now, a question that might be on your mind that I'll go ahead and answer right now is why? Why write equations when you could probably figure out a lot of this yourself without necessarily writing an equation? So what we're doing right now, yes, you could probably figure out without writing an equation. There's 2 reasons to learn to write equations. One, not every situation in the real world is that simple, and sometimes actually writing an equation is the easiest way to figure out what you don't know. The second reason is later, actually in our next unit, we're going to start dealing with 2 variables, times when we don't know 2 things. Okay, so for example, with the coffee problem, perhaps we don't know how many days it would take to use a canister, and we don't know how many tablespoons there are in the canister. And we'll start modeling situations where both of those things can change. And the nice thing is there's a relationship between them, okay, which you can put into an equation, but we can't necessarily calculate an exact answer because we don't know both of the quantities. Okay, but more on that in the next unit. Okay, so enjoy writing your equations. Bye-bye for now.